Ce soir, nous avons comme invité Office Kersten Geers, David van Severen. Nous avons Kersten Geers qui donnera la conférence. Donc c'est un bureau qui aime bien quand même se voir encore comme un jeune bureau. Donc tout à l'heure, quand je demandais quand le bureau a été créé, il disait, bon, normalement avant on disait 2002, comme ça nous faisait un peu vieux et on avait l'air sérieux. Mais maintenant on aime bien dire qu'on a été créé en 2003. Comme ça m'a fait un peu plus jeune. Donc, jeune bureau issus tous les deux de l'université de Gand. Après, deux architectes qui donc non seulement travaillent ensemble, mais sont aussi assez impliqués dans l'enseignement. Donc, Kersten, par exemple, de son côté, il enseigne à l'EPFL et à Boston, et enseignera le semestre prochain à Yale. Il y a des projets d'architecture, mais il y a aussi d'autres projets comme des projets d'édition. Donc Kersten Geers est aussi impliqué comme fondateur de la revue San Rocco et comme éditeur de la revue. Et aussi dans d'autres projets comme par exemple ils seront les commissaires de la Biennale d'intérieur à Courtrai pour l'année prochaine. Et donc ils ont participé à énormément d'événements comme la Biennale de Venise et aussi d'autres expositions. Donc à ce moment-là, il y a plusieurs expositions qui comportent des œuvres de leur part qui sont ouvertes maintenant. Et il y a une exposition monographique qui va ouvrir à Beaux-Arts l'année prochaine, en 2016. Maintenant, je vais ne pas dévoiler trop sur les projets parce que je pense que c'est pas mon rôle. Je voudrais bien donner la parole à Kersten Geers. Merci.
Merci beaucoup Lisa et merci pour l'invitation. Moi je suis dit que je ne peux pas parler français, donc je ne le fais pas. Mais vous comprenez bien que ce n'est pas ma décision. De toute façon, de maintenant, et c'est très étrange, entre l'anglais. Here we are. The difficult double. I have an office together with David, so you could say having an office by two is something like having a difficult double. In a way, everything we design, everything we make the two of us together. So, to a certain extent, tonight also you will hear only a fragment of what we do, because I obviously have a tendency to explain it in a certain way, and David in another way. At the same time, we think that the way of working together, you could say this kind of associative way of making things by bringing things together, it is fundamental to how we think, and how today, if you would like to make architecture and you understand it to be part of the production of culture, you could keep the ambiguity which is necessary to make it survive. So let me start with this small, painting. It's a black and white reproduction of a color painting of David Hockney, of which perhaps you could say it's the glass table collecting these different elements which were at the time, as he recalled himself, objects left in his house by his boyfriend when he left him, and where somehow the kind of composition of the elements together, as elegant as they are arranged, leave a shadow, which is a shadow here, which in one way or another is somehow morphed into the shadow depicting the shadow of the boyfriend. So, in this sense, you could say, for us, the double has always been a very fruitful, I would say, technique. That is to say that one thing always leads to another, and that other doesn't necessarily immediately relate to it, but there is a direct kind of link. So, not going back to this project some years ago for border crossing, in one way or another seems related to this project, this picture, but perhaps I should better indeed call it a project, a picture by Bas Princeton called Ring Road Houston, where, as you can see, putting them one after the other, the content of this adobe wall as a kind of oasis in the desert for crossing the border somehow seems to be reflected in this weird green captured by the mirror glass building. So in the same way, perhaps this particular, I would say, tissue, you see here the metal tissue, containing these palm trees, seem be reflected in the confetti, as was the only architecture here in our Belgian pavilion in 2008, where the architecture, you could say, is not what you can see in the picture, neither as you can see here, but is of course that what is the intervention, or creates the intervention, which finally resulted in the confetti on the floor in the pavilion called After the Party. I'll show you 5 doubles. So, some of them, perhaps some of you will know, and I hope I will not bore you very quickly. It's, let's say the first set is a set of houses which, in many ways, and this picture has been used by many people, it's one of these snapshots of the house of Picasso, with all the furniture somehow haphazardly presented in it, which in many ways was referential for us, but never so consciously so perhaps, when we were making this house. So this house, which is a suburban house in Flanders, it's in the, let's say, the northern part of Brussels, in Buggenhout. So one of these many houses where people live, where they actually work in Brussels, but somehow would still have to live in the countryside. And I think we all know, and this, especially here in Belgium, a very kind of important topic, that these houses, of course, promise many things, but are most of these things, they're obviously not. I mean, as you can see here, so there's a kind of a little snake of allotments alongside this curving road, which was somehow there for quite many years. There's a farmer who is here, who also realizes that he can actually sell part of his land, here this part, because he figured out that this still somehow fits in the current allotment plan. So he sells this piece, cuts them into 4 pieces, as you can see, and then sells them very quickly. As we heard from our clients, all 3 lots were sold in 10 minutes. And of course, perhaps also on the promise that somehow, although they're single-handedly destroying that very landscape, anybody buying here somehow knows that this will not change very quickly, and this little forest there neither. So for us, making a house there was making a house from the idea that as an owner of that house, as a dweller of that house, you're totally ignorant towards your immediate context, but you'd love to believe in your own mise en scène. So we proposed to make a house which incorporates the typical, I would say, border of your lot in the house proper, in the volume of the house. You see that here. So the fence is here and not there. The house plus the fence is positioned in the middle, slightly pushed to the back of it, of the lot. The 4 meter, as you all know, where you cannot construct, is where you can actually maybe drive around if you would want to, or at least drive on either of the sides. The entrance is not in the front, but in the sides. And then, in a way, the house itself is a set of rooms, 9 in the middle, you could say in a mineral setting, a set of brick rooms, which have a front and a back court, which are like gardens of the house. And these, all of them, kind of create this idea of living in this very idyll. Of course, neither one of these houses actually inhabits. So here you see that. Incorporating the perimeter with the volume of the house allows you to give up, I would dare to see as an extreme act of luxury, the in-between space, and say we don't care so much. We own it, but we just kind of keep it as a microscopic part of wilderness. Because for us, the ultimate luxury is to have the neighbor always somehow far away. So here you see the result of that. So looking from inside the house, you look to that perimeter made out of this very simple steel profiles with actually it's seasonal vines which are leaves which are growing on them, so that they also disappear somehow in winter, and then they make that kind of sequence of the space. So here you see it's a very cheap house. I mean it's made with this very big standardized kind of brick. You say like a Dutch staalbouwsteen, so this fast kind of on a cinder block, you could say in English, with a standardized kind of, you could say spans made out of these big concrete panels, and then just simply painted. So here you see that. Here you see a view from one side of the garden to the house. You see inside the kitchen. I didn't really explain a lot about the plan, but you see it here. So basically you have a couple of spaces, 9 in total, a stair in the middle, a storage here, an entrance or a second entrance through the storage, 2 rooms which are really inside, and a whole bunch of rooms which are not really inside but covered, and which are used accordingly with an outside shower and some storage and things like that. So you go back, you see the views, you see one of these views, you see the shower there, I just pointed out, you see the kitchen, the stair, and the table somehow protected against the rain, and the car here parked on the side between you and the neighbor. So you see that here in section. Of course, with us making this thought, this project as an idea, it needs to be translated in very precise materialization. So it's materialization 1, and of course a set of measurements 2nd. So also, for example, here this is 3 meter high, and the top space with its kind of rhythm of, you could say, roofing material is also following the same rhythm and the same height. Of course, the house itself translates in a higher or lower space and a lower top space because of the thickness of all these materials, which we thought is exactly the kind of winter house, summer house kind of relationship we wanted to create. So here you see the winter house, same plan, but since made in a total different material. Here it's a wood balloon frame. Wood balloon frame makes the set of enfilade rooms, 2 bathrooms or would-be bathrooms, the only fixed rooms, a set of rooms, bedroom and maybe office room or living room like that, or living room like this. 2 kids' rooms, they have 2 kids, but they used to sleep together in the first 2 years. Now that one of them moved here, so with a kind of playroom in between. There's also this desire to kind of make an extreme flexibility without making anything flexible at all. So rigidity is flexibility, we believe. It's a kind of, you could say, ignoring modernism to a certain extent. I mean, at least in the plan. So here that translates in this lower house, upper house thing. So you could say a winter house out of mineral materials, very simple, very dry, very hard, and a very warm house made out of wood on top, which is in a way the material you would make a roof from. So here you see that kind of roof floor, you see the bath here, you see the sequence of the rooms, some doors closed, some doors open, as you see. And here you see again that detail, where essentially all these measurements, the fitting of the bricks, this 3 meter versus that 3 meter, this higher floor versus the lower floor, the paneling here, of course all these elements are key. And this brings us to a house which essentially is designed totally from the inside and creates from that illusion a house which mediates and perhaps makes a footnote towards, of course, this, I mean, rather insane way we are still building today in Flanders. So, in quite the same way, and you could say it's false friend, it's difficult double, is this. It's a house very close by. It's about 3 kilometers from the house you saw before. And, you know, as everywhere in the kind of environment of, the immediate environment of Brussels, it's like you have all these villages which are somehow very densified. These densified spaces sometimes make places like this. You can see kind of what they call like a Roman road to a certain extent, right? Full of semi-shops and slightly bigger developments going through the village center here of Merchten. Or these, of course, examples which you just saw before, where you see a bit more of a glimpse of what used to be the Flemish landscape. So here, as you can see, the site is a very deep site because all these sites are somehow very deep. As you can see, some of them were used for small industries or kind of supermarket-like things, as you can see here. It's actually consisting out of a house in the front, you will see that, and then a whole set of, build-outs. There's a whole set of build-outs to the very back, and then there was something like what was left over of a garden. Now, the people here, they approached us while we were building the house I just showed you before, and they told us we would like to have a weekend house here. We thought you kind of totally insane. I mean, why would you want to have a weekend house in there? You know, a weekend house in Merchten, it's depressing. You know? So, okay, they wanted a weekend house there, and they wanted somehow a swimming pool. So that we thought was even weirder, but okay. Now, the guy was Persian, and so he had a certain idea about, we thought maybe it was our projection of living there but not living there at all. So we made very quickly this first collage. And although the project had changed, I think we had rather atypically, because very often the project is there in the first idea. Here we had the idea, but we didn't have the translation. So we came with this kind of slightly adapted Rousseau painting, as you can see. Rousseau meets hockey, you could say, with some kind of, Mies columns or something. And we thought, how can we translate that? And it took us a while. To cut a long story short, perhaps it came back when he understood that we had to think very much the same way as the house I showed you before, and understand that we had to make a sequence of rooms, as you can see here, an enfilade of rooms, filling the entire plot, keeping the front house after having demolished all the back buildings. The back buildings are gone, and trying to change the hierarchy of the space. So in other words, was it possible from the street to arrive here, to enter that building, and to realize that this was the auxiliary building to that? So in other words, this is the building for the visitors, for the ones who stay overnight, whereas this is the main building. So this is the weekend house. That's what we said. Take the whole site. As opposed to the rooms we saw before, which were 4x4, here there are 9 by 9 meter rooms, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Of which, if you look carefully, in a way the plan is very similar to the one you saw before. This is in a way the house, the front and a back court, or a front and a back court, in winter conditions. So in a way you see a very compact house, with a bathroom, with a bedroom, a table, a kitchen here, somehow a kitchen table and a little kind of, let's say, call it living room, but of course it's somehow one room, only this sliver of something kind of creates a certain sense of privacy. And then all of a sudden that pool somehow incorporated in that house, and then a front court and a back court. From there you go, if you would stay there as a guest at the guest house, and you would arrive from here. So that's the point. At the same time, it's also a house which is, you could say, a sequence of spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. And because this roof is always fixed, you will see that, since this roof, as you will see, will move, in many different moments of the season, it becomes like a very wide, very big attempt to kind of take the territory, the total territory of the lot. So here you see that, you see the movable roof, you see the fixed roof, you see that when the roof would be here, and still the bathroom would be there, so it would be outside, that it would be somehow a bathroom which belongs more to the pool than actually to the house. Here you see the guest house. So again, this is a view from the old house, or from what we kind of turned into the guest house to the house, and you see that sequence. So again, what we told ourselves was rather impossible, and as you can understand, we try to make clear to any visitor that it would be attractive to be in that area in the weekend. We somehow turned into a house which is made typically of these, as you can see, double brick walls. So here you see a brick wall, it goes to the other side. You can see it actually in the plan. I'm sorry to go back again. But so here you see a typical room made by these walls. The other room is made again by these walls. So there where they touch, there's a little space here in which the sliding door and the double door glide. At the same time, it was for us symbolically very important. The rooms are made by themselves, where there's no next room coming. So for example here or there in the back, you see the naked wall which creates the space. So go back to the picture. Here you arrive, and in a way you walk into the house at the back. The only thing we did, there's no car here, there's a little step to enter. There's this little little roof which protects you against the rain when you open the door and the lock. But for the rest, this is the back of the building. Even the wiring, the tubing, it's all visible. You can hardly see it maybe from your spot, but it's there. From the inside, that's where we designed the house, that's where we painted. You see the brick walls here, typical AAA, so the walls are a certain size, the opening is the same size, and the wall is again the same size, held together by the steel beam, as you can see it again here in the front. The steel beam is also there to guide the roof, the gliding roof. So here, at the same time, it's corniche. It makes the system of the gliding doors, which are here, AAA, and the gliding roof. So here you see it. You see the shower, the bathroom, let's say, and you see the pool. So of course, here again, and I won't go too much into detail. I have too many things to show. I apologize, but you can understand that also here it's the double wall, it's the height of the wall, it's where you place that specific steel corniche, which is also the system of the roof plus the system of the sliding door, which in a way makes, at least that's what we believe, the architecture. So also it's a decision. For example, this is a construction site picture, and we see it somehow better. So sliding doors are in a way in this AAA system as big as a wall, and they belong to the wall, they're really openings, whereas other doors, they're cuts through the wall. The double door system is like as if the wall is not I mean, it doesn't stop. So these very simple decisions to make a kind of hierarchy in different devices in the space. So here, the roof, as you see, is closed. It's over the pool here now, and then here you have the court in the front. And here you see that sliver of something, which it turns out is a ladder sliver here, which has wood on the other side, which is in a way the only architecture. We thought it was interesting, and all of a sudden the rooms get bigger, so you have to renegotiate space. Of course, the thing is held together with this bar, which gives it stiffness, and this bar, and at the same time, of course, there's the clothes rack. See it again, there's a volume. You see the door here. And you see the front, the back, the front back somehow also the front, where you see the final, in a way, view from the second garden and from the back. So oddly enough, if you see this picture here on the left, your right, sorry, you understand that perhaps by cutting away the first 2.70 meters of the immediate environment, you do have this sense of kind of weekend or holiday. So almost like kind of an escape. So, if you think of architecture for us, I believe it's very important that on the one hand there's this argument making a spatial device, I mean a device which allows you to create a certain space which perhaps is different, is other from the reality which surrounds you, that's for sure. At the same time, it's of course an aspect of measuring, which perhaps I made clear with the first two projects. Also, as I was pointing out a little bit, we believe that it's exactly in that perimeter, in this line, where architecture happens, where sometimes with the minimum of kind of intervention, with almost technical minimalism, or the economy of means to a certain extent, you're able to make something a bit different. So here you have two, I would say, false strands again, of which the first one is this one. It's a drying hall, which this one plus the other one, I think they're very much examples of how a project can be done with almost nothing. So here, what you see is a big set, I mean, fields everywhere. I mean, in a way, we could make the picture even bigger. It's one of these companies, we don't have so many in Europe nowadays, but these big companies which grow plants and trees, this pépinière, as they say in French, I think it's tree nursery, exactly, nurseries. And these nurseries, they, I mean, this particular one, of course, typically commands go by the hundreds or the thousands. I mean, of course, not always, but very often it also needs about 100 trees or 500 trees or whatever, and then they need to be transported to some place where, for example, a new urban plan was built, and somehow they got a commission, they could deliver the trees. So what happens is a lot of transport. So these trees grow for 5 years, 10 years, sometimes only a few months, but often even for many years. But then at a certain point what happens, trucks come, they pick them up, but before transport for 24 hours or 48 hours, they need to be dried. Not to be dried like, you know, you dry herbs, but dry enough so that during transport they do not rot. So that was in a way what we were asked to do. And I have to say, we got this commission in a rather bizarre way. We, as probably some of you know, we're working often together with Bas Smets, the landscape designer, somebody we like a lot to work with. And he, of course, works often with his company, or has been working with his company. And so they were building actually already something like this. They called it a drying hall, but in a way they thought of it like kind of an industrial hall, standardized everything, and then put a couple of grilles, metallic, like say a couple of grids in there, here and there, grills, and then somehow the air would here and there blow through it, and that was it. And somehow I think Bas convinced this client in the making, let's say, to do architecture. And so the guy said, architecture, I want to maybe spend 10% more in money. So we're like, we were really confused because he already had a kind of a quote, like a price from one of these standard builders. And so apparently it was 500,000 euro. And he said, for 550,000 euro, I want you to do it. We thought that's really difficult. So in a way, we thought, is it possible to make, a building which is of course ambitious in what it wants to be, but understands that actually it can't do much. I mean, you have like 550,000 euro, 50,000 euro more than any standard box builder could use. That's close to nothing. So we thought, can we make the most boxy box? Like a box which is like, you would say, it's a box. And I remember very well when we presented it to the client, we showed him these perspectives, and he asked us like, what is the material? And of course he was all of a sudden in this kind of idea of architecture, and we said, it's like a box, and then at first you think it's a box, and later you think, oh no, maybe it's stranger. And he said, what's the material? I said, well, the material is probably steel. I said, steel? No, I mean architecture, that's made out of wood, like in Switzerland. And I said, look, I'm sorry, but I mean, we understand you do plans, but you cannot make that out of wood. You need to double the budget. So we also thought it was a bit absurd to do that. We thought, is it not possible to kind of go to the core of this very simple steel building? Right? It took a while, but he followed, and I think he's also today very happy with what we did. So, okay, the box, the most boxy box, let's say. So of course it's not entirely true what I'm saying, in the sense that it was a box which we wanted you to appear like a box, but then when you would get closer you would understand that something was fundamentally wrong with that box. So on the one hand, of course, in a way you could say it's a box containing trees, because they dry in there, in the same way as everything around it. So it's kind of very strange. It's like a box over trees in a field of trees. That's one thing. And secondly, it's a box which, in a way, is not supposed to perform in the way you think a building performs, because when a building performs, it closes you from the wind, it kind of closes you from the cold and so forth. It's exactly the inverse. So here, in a way, it's a box where the winds are supposed to blow through, because, of course, you dry plants. At the same time, if you would make a very simple box, as the original kind of quote was made for, you would have to put a couple of grills here and there, and the wind would blow through it. The way we saw it, and you can see that here in the plan, was like, can you not make a box, you get rid of all the insulation, everything which was in the standard box, so you win a bit of money, but then you make a totally perforated box. Of course, then you have to be sure that you make it in such a way that when the wind blows through, but also the rain, that the rain does not touch the plants, because they're supposed exactly to dry. So the geometry, you could see, with the double straight corner comes from there. So the highest point on the top, the lowest point here on the bottom, exactly there where most winds are coming from, it takes a bit of distance from the plants to dry. So here you see that in section. In a way, the section is very simple. It's a typical kind of a very big standard beam, which is obviously thicker in the middle, which would maybe turn into a pitched roof if you turn it upside down. We kind of twisted it, as you see, and we put it in an angle as to have one point where the water would come down, and that water is then again recuperated to water the plants elsewhere. So these elements allowed us to make, in a way, a building which plays with the idea of somehow not really being a building. Because here you see the beams, you see the perimeter, the facade, and you see here, in a way, the material. So what we used is a corrugated steel. It's kind of typical corrugated steel you see in many industrial buildings. We took it in a specific size, and then we got it perforated. I mean, this is a material which in smaller sizes you typically see in buildings on ceilings, often industrial buildings, for sound insulation. But here, somehow using it as a facade material, it works somehow somewhat differently. So here you see that. You could say the building is only that detail, that material, that detail, so the no detail, you could say, no profiles which connect it, which is hard if the box would be insulated, but not so hard when you don't do that, although you have to get rid of the gutter, so that we had to resolve. And then the same material again for the roof, but then obviously not perforated. This is the building as it was made. So of course, within this whole argument, you have this kind of ghost of a building. You know, it's a container which you can somehow look through, and which has a set of openings, like a very high one, a lower one, and one here, which somehow make you confused about what you're actually looking at. You see it here again. And of course, it's also about how you detail these doors, that they are visible but also not very visible, as you see it again here. And here, of course, because of the sloping roof and the beams on which we put the lights, you have this strange effect of this kind of lights, as you can see here. And the almost paper-like facade when you look inside. So the volume becomes almost like, you could say, a Japanese wall, and you can literally see through from inside to outside. So here you see, to a certain extent, architecture is made only on the thinness of the perimeter, only on the kind of resolving technical details, but also, I mean, it's about decisions. Huh? For example, these columns are told, or they try to tell you, they carry these beams, okay, you see that, this one too. So they are, of course, also the columns which kind of amount for, you could say, the wind load from the side. Here you would need the same columns, but that's the other side. So here we paint the columns in the same color. They're very thinner, of course, because they're only for wind loads, not for the beams. But at the same time, they're there, but they're painted in the same color facade. So it's all also about how you manipulate perception and how you understand that, you know, everything here would like to tell you, look, that's what I want to be in this building. So this building, in many ways, is perhaps is a brother of this building. So if you could say, is it possible to make a building which contains trees, and that as a thought, is it also possible to make urbanism with a building which contains trees? Then perhaps we tried to do it here. So you see here this one, you see it here, you see here. So these are like 4 buildings, very much as in a way buildings, very much as a perimeter, but containing trees, obviously not in a context with trees. So here you have Sarja. We were asked by Yuko Hasegawa, the curator of the Sarja Art Biennial, first to make something like a master plan, which we did. I mean, there were more of these elements to kind of densify what was left over, you could say, of the Arab grid. So there's not much. I mean, everything else is somehow eaten by this more contemporary development. So we proposed many more of these interventions, and then we got commissioned 3 of them ourselves. Others were done by Studio Mumbai, Barcelona, and so forth. So we took it very literal, and we in a way made 3 pavilions. And these pavilions at the same time are in a way, you could say, very small parks, very small gardens. So our thought was that it was possible to do this, you could say, temporary constructions. And we were inspired by this Arish. And Arish is this palm leaf constructions they used to have around Dubai. Sharjah is next to Dubai, it's one of the Emirates, you probably know. And so here, an old picture of the l'époque, as they say, where you see this Arish structure, very beautiful, which somehow negotiate their own temporariness. So here you see one of these from closer. And here you go back to the plan. So 1, 2, 3, you see them again. So, of course, there were many ideas overlapping here. Perhaps also this idea that maybe if you take away the pavement, you find back la plage, but also, in a way, the sand of these, you could say, these oases, which, of course, are long forgotten if you're in this harbor city, Sharjah, in the Emirates. At the same time, it was an attempt, as I said, to bring trees in the urban fabric, at least temporarily. So that, I mean, the argument about the public space and how you could make public space in a place which does not deal with public space quite the same way would be possible. So here you could say the spaces are attempts to make protected gardens. So you have 3 of them. And you have the details. So you see, as the first project I showed you, what is there? There's a perimeter, there's a structure, there's a column, there's a height difference. There are always 3 meter high steel mesh curtains, you see here. But of course, sometimes the space is 3 meter high, sometimes a bit higher because the floors are not all the same. So in a way, that's the architecture. That's the detail here, the column, the ground, and so forth. This is the mesh. This is the detail. This is the picture. And you see, it's one of them. I mean, as constructions, all of a sudden, they allowed us to introduce a park in a place where, you know, a very big, call it European-style public space, open and protected, was unthinkable. So you see it next to the mosque. You see the picture I showed you in the beginning. I mean, by Bas Prinsen, but all pictures are by Bas Prinsen, but this particular one, you could say, escapes even the idea of showing the architecture. So then again, I as I said, it's an argument about how little you can do in order to still make architecture. And we are very convinced that exactly architecture there lays perhaps only in that kind of very strange, silly difference between the height there and the height here. Good, there's plenty of stuff to go, right? So you get worried that I speak too slow and everything is too long. So I move on. We stay in the Middle East. And when we're in the Middle East, I mean, we've been lucky or unlucky, I don't know how you see that, but we were very, very happy to have somehow the opportunity a few times, and we're somehow still busy with that, to work in the Middle East and to not work on what you could say the cliche of maybe before 2008 style gigantic developments in total ignorance to its context, but rather to work on small projects which somehow make you think about where are we and what does it mean and what's public space here, what's heritage here, what's structure here and so forth. And I'm not saying that what we do is exactly how we should do it, but for us it was a very interesting, or is a very interesting exchange, because I think you get over your own kind of prejudices. So here, we're back in the Middle East, you see a tissue, anyway, similar of the densest part of Sharjah, but we're in Muharraq. Muharraq is actually a city in Bahrain. Muharraq, Bahrain, you see perhaps one of the parts in the Middle East, in the Gulf, which is still the closest to what you imagine or what maybe in our dreams you think is a kind of the maze kind of tissue. So here, even though it looks like a maze somehow, it's of course all these buildings, they have a very dubious age. Many of these buildings are endlessly repainted, replastered, rebuilt. I would dare to say buildings older than 20 years are hard to find. It's crazy. I mean, even though they look old, they're not old at all. So that's one thing. At the same time, I mean, actually it's a project of two of these buildings. I'll come back to that. They also deal with the idea of what on earth is heritage in such a context. So here, I'll come back to that. There's on the one hand, there's this building which is a dar. They call it a dar, but dar in a way is only the Arabic for house. And in a sense, it's a house. It's originally a house. This is a very recent construction in the 1990s, I think. But it's a place where people play music, you could say. So here is the music they play. And I cannot get rid of this type of, I have to admit, this kind of Asterix-like idea of how under the Romans they were making sounds to kind of make the boats go faster. And so in some strange way here also you have the same. So basically it's a music which comes from the tradition of pearl fishing. So in pearl fishing there was this aspect of rhythm and tempo. And so what did they do? They were all on the boat and they made this kind of sound. So with clapping hands, hitting things and so forth. And so in that tradition, a tradition which somehow since the 1930s gradually disappeared, or very quickly disappeared. They found oil in Bahrain earlier than most Gulf states. And now, by the way, oil is gone, so they have nothing left, more or less. But basically, that whole idea of pearl fishing created this idea of community in music. These people, they were essentially going for pearls in this group. They were often for days, if not for weeks, if not for months, on a boat. And then when they would be on land, they would still gather together and make this music. So essentially, these very small communities, and there's about 3 left in Bahrain, they make this music like that. And they have a few of these communities in Kuwait, they have a few of these communities all over the Gulf, and it became, of course, in some sense, a heritage. So what happens is that these groups, old men, by the way, they gather together in what they call this dar. So the dar, in both cases, you could say it's here, it's this building or that building. There is kind of buildings which, in some cases, in one of the 2 cases, is old, and in one of the 2 cases is new. And now I apparently start with a new one. So this is a new building. I don't know if the old one. Yeah, that's the old one. So, and you perhaps can imagine that we were originally approached by the Ministry of Culture in Bahrain to work on these, maybe because they saw somehow a similarity between that plan and our own architecture. So they asked, like, is there something you would like to do with these? Now, I have to say, this is already the cleaned up version of this dar. Essentially, the situation up to a year ago was that there was a wall here and some other things, but this is the original plan of, let's say, the traditional house. Actually, there's a wall missing here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rooms around the court. You would enter through the court, and then these rooms would work, and in these rooms they would kind of appropriate and play music. So in a way, a very private thing. The newer building from the 90s has this too, somehow, but it's very clumsy, and has a bigger space here, as you can see, around the court. And we were asked to extend these places. He was like, can you extend these places? And we immediately thought, like, it's not possible. You cannot extend these places. You can only build a building next to it, with all the new things they need. Maybe also a building which relates more to the size of the developments around it. So basically, this is a very low building. This one also somehow. But the buildings around it fit typically the 10-meter level which you can now build in these neighborhoods. So this is Muharraq I talked about. I showed in the aerial picture. This is Rifa. It's another village in Bahrain. So in both cases, we decided to keep the building, something which is logical here, perhaps, to clean it. It's kind of heritage. But also here, we said, look, in a place like that, heritage is a very dubious thing. Let's just keep the type. So we add this building next to it. We cannot so much see it in the plan, this building and that building here. In a way, two times more or less the same building with very different proportions. As opposed to a set of rooms surrounding a court, it's always 3 rooms stacked on top of each other on a very simple plateau which pushes out in very much the same way as we saw we were dealing with spaces here, the stair, the toilet, and so forth. You could say if that's the dar, so the house, the private space, the extension is the mejlis. So here you see the mejlis next to the dar, mejlis, same thing, same building, just a mirror view. Here you see it again as a section, or a kind of facade room, and you can see it here again. So without going too much into detail, so here you have, in a way, a structure with concrete columns and sometimes steel columns which have the ducts. You have these 3 rooms on top of each other, and you have the services on the side. You have the structure of the box, in a way, is this box, that box, and these boxes here are the really contained spaces. The surface on the outside, and then there's this kind of curtain, not unlike the curtain you just saw before in the Sarja, which is working here as a sun protection. So here you see that again in a smaller building, and you see it here in the plans. So this is some models of how it develops. And you see that to a certain extent, it's always this relationship between building and this new building. In a way, we think subtle, but at the same time rather aggressive way. There's one and the other, they're totally related. Everything about what they are in terms of space relation, column, rhythm, and so forth, has something to say with each other, yet they have a totally different expression. So here you see them under construction, they're about now here. I mean, they're supposed to add the boxes inside. There's a picture of about a month ago, I think. You see them here. And you see that they do bring, despite their small size, a very different scale. Because it's then the shared space of the measures next to the dar. In Muharraq, in the densest neighborhood, they introduce a very different scale in that very neighborhood. Now here you see that also this thing is, of course, it's about how that curtain and it opens and so forth. And voilà. Now, it's double, you find perhaps, in the relationship between finding a building, not destroying the building, because of course in their idea of extension they thought we would build on top or make an extension of any kind, but to build next to it, to say A and B are 2 very different universes. Perhaps you find it in this building which is here in Brussels, in Uccle en fait, close to the Churchill area, where actually now it's a bit changed recently, but they have this, in a way, very beautiful street, a very fancy street, I would say, with here the Van Buren complex, very nice. It is a house of the Van Buren family with their beautiful garden and their nice art collection you can visit. And then at the same time you had a set of houses which in some way keep up this, I would say, bourgeois idyll of living in the countryside in the center of Brussels, with a tennis club next to it. And so when we were approached to deal with a house here, there was still a house here which if you would go there now you see is demolished and replaced by a rather monstrous creature. Nevertheless, we thought it was important to keep the rhythm of these houses. They are like, I would say, the bourgeois aspect of these houses which are standing there was interesting enough not to immediately ignore it and destroy it for kind of a contemporary attempt. So here the reference was, and you could use the same reference for Muharraq, this very beautiful drawing of Philip Guston. It's on the cover of a little book on drawings, as you can see. Of course, you see two objects, one on top of the other, one more figurative than the other, or not. But also something which at the same time is super abstract, or when I tell you in a way Guston made his drawings in his spirit, he was totally obsessed with drawing hats of the Ku Klux Klan, you see it too. So this kind of very ambiguous relationship between what it wants to present and what it represents and what it doesn't really show. You know? We thought that was interesting. At the same time also, maybe as in Muharraq and in Rifa, the project we showed before, how do you deal with something which is already there? So here, there's something which was there is the White House on the top. So that's the house which was there, of which our clients at first, they thought they might not want to destroy it, because, yeah, it was of course not so cheap to do that, but at the same time, they did not like it. They thought it was an ugly house. It was a house maybe from the wrong period, because it's in a way 1950s house looking like much older, but it was very beautifully built. And it was a house which had here a garage, here in front, here a garage door, and then not much in the back, and then here a stair next to it, which made you enter the entrance, which is high, because you can see actually the level of the house is here. We thought it was interesting, rather here, to build a pedestal for the house. So you see the building under it, in a way, is a new house, and it carries the old house. So of course it's an interesting challenge for us, as architects perhaps, but it also has to do with the fact that I think the clients themselves have a very interesting, ambiguous relationship with their own sense of representation. They're in a very fancy neighborhood. They did not want so-called to make a fancy house. We thought, okay, look, any aspect of the representation of bourgeois life is already there. So you build something under it, which in some strange way, of course, doesn't deny it, but plays a kind of a strange role to that. So the house itself is, of course, a brother of other houses we designed, but in a sense different, that where rooms were designed or built or drawn through full lines, here you see it's made with dotted lines, you can say. And so the dotted lines rooms for us was an experiment in how can you make a set of rooms in a way on three different sizes, A, B, A again, C, A, B, and so forth, as you can see, so that they can contain anything, but that somehow in this kind of B, A, B, A, B here, you have a kind of sense of organization. And then sometimes it's open, here a court, or here. And sometimes it's actually open but covered, here under the house, the entrance. Sometimes it's totally closed, it's a garage. And sometimes it's rather bizarre what it is. So here's something like a kitchen and a living room, that's kind of a salon. And in a way, by adding in between these columns very few closing elements, you kind of organize the space. So here's the house on top, which of course, since it used to enter, you used to enter it here to reorganize. So this in a way, the evening house, the first floor, I think the second floor I don't have here, which of course works totally independently, in which the lower part is represented. At the same time, here, as, and I did not take the chance to show this to you, as maybe in the buildings, the dar, the houses in Muharraq, in Bahrain, we have an argument of making a building out of concrete columns, and sometimes not. So here you see that, concrete columns, and sometimes not. So concrete, and sometimes it looks like concrete, but it's not. Here you see the in-between face with the wooden structure of the insulation line. Here you see that. So everything looks like concrete columns, but here where the insulation line is, it's not concrete. It wants to be concrete, but it's not concrete. So it tells you this. So we are very interested in this kind of strange stuff. So here you see it more in detail, the concrete column, there where it works, where it's lined up to here. And then the steel column with a kind of a wooden finish, which is actually working like a window room, there where the insulation line is. So it allows us to make a full glass panel here, and so it looks all the same, but it's not the same at all. So here you see garage picture. And here you see that also, and that's another argument, using materials, maybe the most expensive materials there where you don't expect it. So the garage is clad in this marble, but I mean, actually you see the garage from the salon through the entrance. So this is, for example, this wooden column, and here there's a concrete column. And so you see it, but you don't see it. Here again, it's a wooden structure, here it's that, and this is the concrete structure. So again here, almost like in our old Roman villas, it's with the floor materials that everything gets its particularity. Steel doors, we organize the space, I will not go into that, and so forth. So So again, as perhaps a brother of the Bahrain development, it's a building which only tries to focus on the structure and how, building against the structure, taking distance of the structure, it tries to make its point. And then, of course, it's almost stages, you could say, a relationship with the existing building. As you can see here, literally, we cut the building and the stairs just put on top of it. And so you understand that the building under it, it is obviously, it's full aware of what it carries, but it's a little bit in defiance, you could say. So here you see also the railings, the garde-corps. They're in the inside, they're detailed in exactly the same way as they are, here you see it again, on the outside. So in a way, the base of the building which carries it tells you, look, I am carrying, but I'm also autonomous. So it brings us to the fourth and almost last chapter, sorry. So this thought of this, in a way, fully pushing of building something as a structure to a certain extent, as a solution which, with the first decision to build something in some way, defines almost all of your architecture, I feel is perhaps also what you can find here. This is a school in Leuven, where, I mean, amongst other things also, I think the geometrical position is very important, so we decided to propose, in the competition at the time, to place the building of the school here in orientation of the fields, rather than in the orientation of the street, where the other two school buildings were. In relationship, it's an agriculture school, to find that relationship in the school. At the same time, it's also a building which is, in a way, the decision to build the sports hall underground and to build the classrooms in front of it here. So the sports hall is under here with the playground. So in a way, the inverse of what you typically see. Where is that? Here's the thing here. That's the playground in that part of the school. We turn it upside down. Makes the other decision. So very much, and I mean, we don't have to hide our references. You could say, as Alejandro Sota did with his school, and we don't have the ambition, or we have the ambition, of course, but we're not sure if we would even achieve that, to build a building that beautiful as his here. But nevertheless, it's an important reference. So this kind of idea in which he makes a building at a street, makes a playground, makes a sports hall, makes classrooms. I mean, our buildings are much simpler. I think we are living in another time. But so nevertheless, we play in similar topics. So that one decision I was talking about is, of course, the sports hall here, the playground as exactly the same size as sports hall, the twisted position of the building allowing us for making one bike storage around, which is also the ramp to go down or up, and then all the classrooms looking over the view in Leuven, I mean, over the fields, also the fields where the students study and work. So here you see that. Another aspect, perhaps, is this thing for us important, that, and I must say, also been a bit problematic, but it's kind of getting resolved, that in a way, in a project like that, with very little budget again, the main decision was to make this wall here, and you see also in the sports hall below, out of this pre-wall system. It's kind of a concrete system which you pour concrete in between, which is very typically used for these big, I would say, industrial boxes, but by cutting the windows, not according to the system, so not in between, but some through it, you give it a very different feel and it becomes almost like a measuring system. It's certainly something which helps the two projects I'm showing now together. So here you see that, you see the perspectives. Actually, it's called Belvedere Walravens. Why? Because we make this cut to oversee the city. You see a standard floor, the entrance hall and the kind of shared space and the sports hall. This is actually the floor of the changing rooms and the sports hall below. And you see all the stairs who go up and down, of which the main stair is, of course, this stair, and the sub-stairs, which are there for fire escape, but at the same time there are shortcuts, of course, to go from different levels of the class, especially for the teachers. So here you see that. For us, the most important facade, you could say, the clock, very important. I mean, what's a public building today? We think these are fundamental things which are, we should readdress or just simply address. And then that's that building system. So here you see that. You see some of the detailing, and you see the building as it is now. Actually, it's still not in use. It was supposed to open a year ago, but then we had some trouble with the playground here. And now this is supposed to be resolved in a few weeks, I think. actually maybe even next week already, so that they can finally use it. So here you see the sports hall, you see the classroom, and you see the playground. Voilà. And the stair, the sports hall. So this is a work, actually, an intervention, this weird tree by Richard Vendek, the artist, who, by the way, I could use here by way of bridge, is also the artist with which we work on the next project. So here, I think all of a sudden you go back to Belgium and you ask yourself, like, what is that? What defines a public building? I mean, building for a school obviously isn't a town. So here you have another building. Very simple as well, a competition we won a year ago, I think a year and a half ago, together with Richard Vendek, in the fields of Ostende, I mean the polders. It's a building for a crematorium. We're currently working on it. We just delivered building permit 2 weeks ago. The building has a little bit changed from what you see here. These are the competition drawings, but not much. Essentially all the elements are there. So again here you could say, as opposed to the school, which is this facade you can recognize in the sports hall and the playground, here you have the roof, which we thought as a fifth, you could say, facade, makes a nature morte. So this nature morte for us was an attempt to answer the problem of what on earth is the symbolism you connect with the crematorium, but it's very difficult to express. It's very difficult to express because a crematorium is, of course, a building for many religions. So it's very difficult to kind of find a definitive symbolism to that. So it should be many things. At the same time, a crematorium is also a building, maybe not unlike the school I showed you before, which today, more than any other building, is super technological. In a way, it's a big box, not unlike the building I showed you before, in the beginning. It's a box which is having machines, essentially. I mean, it has these 2 or 3 ovens. It's with a high frequency, but at the same time it's also a building which would like to be a public building, which would like to be accueillant, which would like to be a building where you come and you feel at ease. It's a very difficult moment when you visit it. So here we worked with Bas Smets on a kind of general master plan, a landscape plan for the site. You can see it here, but you could probably see better here. So that's the whole site, as you can see. Very important, we thought, was that when you arrive at the building, you arrive from a very big distance. So in a way, we made the layout such a way that you come from very far, you arrive like this. There's this whole set of these kind of lines of trees, which are in a way a negotiation, you could say, between their desire in Ostende to fill the whole area of the polders with a boulder forest, which is a bit strange, you could say, because it's not typical for polders. And our feeling that at least from this moment on, the polders are what they are. So can you kind of negotiate? Can you make these lines of trees, which are typically there for dikes, and kind of open up gradually? So Bas's argument was also, since the site is very low, the trees make dikes. It's the only places where you can walk, to a certain extent, apart from the paths which cross it. And all the rest is semi-wet landscape. So in that semi-wet landscape, there's this building here, our building, and a couple of other elements which are intricately part of the layout, and which together, of course, make the mise en scène. And you approach so gradually the building with, as I said before, the nature morte, the kind of still life, which we thought was an interesting answer to capture a kind of landscape death, to a certain extent, the content of the building. So this still life we developed together with Richard Vendek. So it's a set of, you could say, light cones and light elements, but also, of course, chimney elements and so forth. Why? Because it's a very, in a way, ironical aspect of a crematorium that, I mean, at least in Flanders, you're not allowed to show the chimney. So there's a kind of an interesting problem that they have this building, which is obviously for one specific reason, but you cannot really see it. So we see everything in an indirect way. So hence you could see this thing. So in a way it makes this very big table with the columns, under which there's a set of parallel walls which create the building as such. Here you see that. It's still, as I said, a competition plan. There's not so much change. There's a little bit different here in the front. I must say it's always been a very awkward corner here, so we resolved that, I think. But essentially, you have here the machine room. Huh? So a third of it, if not half, is there where the machines are very hot. Actually, in the final plan, this is also totally non-insulated, it's very interestingly so. And then you have the two main halls where the services happen, the waiting rooms for the families, which cannot cross each other. There's a whole story about it. The family rooms where you do the condoléances, and then you leave under the roof. I mean, this is all slightly bit better resolved, luckily. In the competition, you don't always have the chance to get it all right. To do the service. So here you see that again, so in section is very interesting. In a way it's a box which has its height here where necessary to make the machines work. It's very low and almost intimate, or certainly intimate, here at the place of the entrance. A few perspectives of the competition. So where in a way the walls themselves, which are essentially the same kind of walls as you saw in the school, you could say that's one of the links. Organize the spaces. Here, for example, this big piece of furniture we work on with Richard, and it gives somehow light, but not only with the relationship with the family room. And here, you can see the model as it is, with that roof, that kind of, here all of a sudden the space is very high. This is also where the cars with the dead bodies come, you could say. And then all of a sudden, there's a kind of, almost like a curtain out of concrete, which kind of takes it a bit out of view. So this, to move to the very last point, sorry, it's a long journey, and say this thought of this very big roof which contains many things, for us it's also, it's been something like an insight, like how much wider can you make the architecture as to contain something, things you want to be inside, but also other things. You allow things in, you know, you draw the line a bit bigger, you say. So to draw the line bigger and to seek for where you can draw it, perhaps the last two projects are both experiments in that. So this house under construction in Spain called the Solo House is a strange house because it's in a site of 45 hectares where the owner or the client, one who commissioned us the project, he said, he gave us a site, he said that's the site. And there's a few other houses in the making. There's one house which is constructed, maybe some of you know, by Pizzo van Elrichhausen, which is not so far away, but still far enough that you don't see it. And then there's this house on the plateau. This is a picture with glass sanders, which I think is a Zeppelin kind of, what is it, airport at the time. And I don't really understand the picture, but somehow we thought, and it had that word solo on it, so it was interesting. So we thought, hey, why not? And then you have this drawing of the plateau. You see it somehow a little bit. You see the plateau, in which you could say we somehow formalized this idea of the maximum of the site. So you could like, hey, if the plateau runs here like this somehow, it was like, is it possible to do this so that it's a little bit outside, but oh, this is the border, and this is how you arrive. So that's, I think, how we thought the house. Also, perhaps because we wanted to make a house which is not one to show itself as a gigantic sculpture, which perhaps in a commission like that would be evident. And also in a way to look for the possibilities in this beautiful landscape, to only think of the landscape and see architecture perhaps as an attempt to mediate between you and the landscape and to make you always as far away from each other as you can. So here is this kind of circle of 45-meter diameter. You see, in a way, there's a square drawn in the circle. I guess you can see that. So that's this, and this. So it's not that we all of a sudden now start fading squares. No, in a way, I could say. And these squares, of course, this square cuts off here a piece, there a piece, there a piece, and there a piece. So one which is somehow in the outside house, and two, I mean, in a way, you could say a house is like this. I mean, then there's something like a guest house and something similar to that. So this is a section. The roof is only the technical solution of making that concrete roof. So you need that flat roof. You need a beam to carry the roof. And then all the it's a solo house, it's an autonomous house in this case. So all the devices you need to make the house autonomous are incorporated. So they're all in there, you know, the sun panels and the water boiler and I don't know what, they're all there. And somehow we thought it was interesting that they became almost like, you know, the sculptures on top of the roof in some strange way, very simple, but also very, very, very present. So they have the devices which create your own autonomy. And then there's this, this space under which somehow maximizes or tries to underline what's already there. So you see the same section, other section, same building, of course. And you see the collages as we made them at the time with these devices, you know, this kind of relationship inside and outside, and another. So here you see it in detail, whereas perhaps the first houses I showed you were experiments in making house with wall and room only. Here we try to make a house without wall or room, in a way. You say it's the columns which carry the roof here are the only architecture on its. You almost plug in a kitchen or a toilet or a bathroom. I find it somehow better in the newer plans which are here. You see here, you know, these objects, they negotiate between column and border, and they make on themselves, on their own right, something like semi-spaces. So almost the inverse of architecture we were doing before. At the same time, of course, with a very similar effect. Like this, like this, like this. See it here again. And here you see the construction. So here you see the site. I mean, I think you easily agree with me, and it's so beautiful that anything you do destroys it. So you try to do as little as you can. I mean, this is the way they say you remark the site, whatever, you know, a beautiful story. And then somehow you have the structure carries the roof, and that's more or less now where we are. So you see, this is building as imposed. I mean, there was a little bit of a slow period, but now they started again. So, where in a way this roof is at the same time, you know, the protection, but also the curtain rail, because I didn't really explain that. So whereas this facade is fixed, you know, there will be glass in between, and here and there are some doors. It's the outside facade which works in a way as a curtain rail, so that you can actually open it completely to the outside in some cases or not. So there's this kind of thing that, yeah, it again becomes extremely strange or ambiguous on what we exactly were after when you saw the house. But at the same time, I would like to say, let's remember, or at least I would like to take with me to the very last project I'm going to show you, this search for what is now taking a terrain, what is kind of its maximum line. So what you do, I mean, in this case, it's super simple and very geometrical to create this kind of man-made space in relationship to its extremely beautiful nature. At the same time, in here, I mean, we're already there, last project, you could say it's almost the inverse. So here, where we are in Lausanne, in the RTS, you maybe know this building, it's the Learning Center of Sanaa. And this is our project. It's a competition we won a year ago about now. It's interesting, this project, and in a way in this collage you hardly see it, but you see it a little bit, it's badly placed. But here there's a building, here this shape actually, exactly this shape, which does not allow you to make anything normal here. And so as a result, the shape of our building looks like this gear, which is funny enough maybe apt if you think that it's a radio and television complex. So here we are. This idea of taking site, but also this idea of kind of organizing through fitting an almost precise geometrical form in a space somehow predefined is of course something you could say has interested us from the very beginning, the beginning of the office. Here, about the sari painting, I mean, it's been of course a very good example. So you have this event, you don't know what the people are looking at because Baldassare decided to cut out exactly that piece which creates the scene. So I mean, Baldassare, you probably know, from the moment he burned all his existing paintings, if I'm not mistaken, late 60s or early 70s, all of a sudden he decided not to paint anymore and to just find things and to manipulate, like gluing dots on it or cutting rectangles out of it or asking other people to paint it and so forth. So this idea that in a way you as an author, you're able to organize simply by taking away, by overlaying and so forth, I think is here visible the strongest. So we'll go back to the site and you can of course see that, I could say the building, apart from having a kind of very strange affinity with that building, I mean circle and square, right? It's also for us an exercise, and so this is the site as you can see, this is the site as we got it. This is the building as it's existing. How can you on the one hand try to take all the site, almost like an attempt to make a carpet covering the whole site, negotiating the perception of taking all the site, so we decided to round the corners so that in a way you don't have to abruptly stop, but that kind of gives the impression of, well, you know, it's somehow endless. And at the same time organize the site on another skill level. So it's a long story. You could say in simple terms, there's a campus of EPFL, which is you know, the engineering faculty here of Lausanne, and the Technische Hochschule, right? And then here you have Uni, which is the University of Lausanne. So basically it's all university, this EPFL. If you look carefully, apart from the fact that this pavillionaire is little house here, I mean there's two very different tissues. So on the one hand, there's a tissue which is very dense and it's kind of, well, you could say 1970s mega structure, but then somehow weakened down in the recent years. On the other hand, you have the building in the landscape. We were very interested to build a building which is really here as a pivot between all buildings on the one hand, or both campuses. That was literally the question. And also somehow a last piece in a set of, you could say, landscape pieces which have been built here in front, which is, of course, the Learning Center. This project here called Under One Roof. The other Japanese architect, his name now escapes me, so it doesn't matter. And then, of course, the RTS, the Swiss Radio and Television building, which is a strange building because it's the only building not belonging to the university here. So we thought, is it possible, on the one hand, to bring together the size of the fragments of the UNIL, so these smaller pieces, campus model, and the sizes of these big, yeah, call it motherfuckers, this gigantic kind of mega structures that you have here, which are somehow related in a software, translated in software here in the building. So you could say two types. So you see that here, you could say on campus level, it's a building which is a set of buildings, still quite big buildings. There's an office tower, a big radio, television, plateau sur le télévision, so it's a kind of very big recording hall. Another for the radio. There's a lot of trucks, as you can see, a lot of storage, but also this kind of very big recording trucks which are there, and then Mediatek kind of building. So there's like 4 buildings. And on the top level, or say the first level, you have a very big field. And of course, these buildings, they pinch through the field and they act to a certain extent like the Baldassari painting, hopefully, that they organize, like what we said in French here, the aimant, like magnets. They organize literally that field, which on the other hand has no other structure but the structure itself. I mean the beams and the poutres, which are connected from one to another, which make the building stand. At the same time, this acts like a gigantic roof which protects both truck movements, entrances here, lobbies, and places where people can have activities in the relatively cold climate, of course, of Lausanne. You could say, is it somewhere between that kind of field and the kind of Piranesian kind of set of buildings? Maybe so. Of course, in its literal sense, it looks like that. So there's a fragment of the one building, a fragment of the other building, and all the beams and very big spans in between. So here we have that building, as I explained it. So on the one hand, it negotiates the terrain in that what it can maximally take in the simplest and smoothest of ways. On the other hand, it negotiates the idea of the address in relationship to all the existing buildings. So here you see that. These are the competition perspectives. And at the same time, of course, the building itself, the very big champ, as we call it, is one floor full of the redactions there where television and radio is made, which use these boxes to record things, and which are just held by the structure which is hung in between. So here you see that. So you see kind of a facade drawing where you have the kind of long, 6 meter high kind of field of work, like a non-stop city perhaps. And at the same time you have a cut to these volumes, which are essentially buildings in their own right. So here you see structure plan from Bolling and Roman, with whom we developed this project, and you see obviously the same. So the result is this plan, and this, in a way, set of perspectives of the plan, where structure becomes, again, extremely visible and, in our opinion, extremely architectural. In a way, the structure is the only thing we have. You see here, actually the structure is such that the beams carry from volume to volume. On top there's these other very big beams. This plus this makes a total span, and then the floor hung on these beams. So, it's the whole package to a certain extent does the job. So here the direction of the beam. So you have a shed roof, and here the other way around. So here you go on the ground level, and you have this, the way we negotiate with the campus itself, the different entrances, the lobby. I mean, slightly changed now, but not so much. Of course, the way these addresses work, separate addresses, and then again here, the entrances to that. This is inside the box and outside the box. And this is then, of course, how the building is detailed. Ultimately, I would say it is, and I think I can more or less close off here with the last set of pictures of that. I mean, there are snapshots from the models that they were presented. Ultimately, it's of course for us, it was this attempt to negotiate many of these topics I hope to have clarified to you before, in a building which allows you to make almost like a micro city. So I think at the same time scary and even dangerous as it is attractive. It is the place where, of course, many of these typological models come together up to a point that they kind of become a universe on their own.